Hello again. This is Dr. Chris Cooper of Standout Docs. We've been talking about physician burnout and leadership, and we're here at another beautiful place because that's how I like to decompress and recharge myself. And that's what we're going to be talking today. Who am I and how do I recharge myself when the going gets tough? Because as we know, we've been talking about the whirlwind and the burnout that we've been experiencing over at least the last few years, if not longer, in our careers. And so we're trying to figure out, okay, how do we deal with that burnout and that whirlwind that we feel like we've been in? So we've been talking about the signs and symptoms of burnout and the 6 major causes of burnout. And putting all those things together, we've learned that if our professional needs are unmet, on top of taking care of highly complex situations, seeing a lot of tragedy, loss, and grief, and we have a leadership role on top of that, all while suppressing our emotions, that can lead to some pretty traumatized healthcare professionals, moral injury, and what's even worse is a significant healthcare worker crisis coming up very soon. So as we talked about last time, the number one cause of physician burnout is being in medicine itself, because it's such a what we call a VUCA world. VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I think we all agree that that's where we've been for sure in the last couple of years. So in the midst of all this change, how am I doing? Am I showing up the way I expect that I should in not only my personal relationships, but my professional ones as well? Am I living up to my personal values like I thought I would going into medicine? Or am I kind of stuck in my physician programming with the workaholic, superhero, stoic, Lone Ranger type of programming that's perfectionistic and never shuts off, because that leads us to feeling overwhelmed and so frustrated that we're not even sure we can stay in medicine. We're questioning whether this is still our calling and whether there's maybe something else we should be doing instead. So the who am I becomes, wow, am I in this unstable state of burnout that my identity is so tied to my professional role and my professional identity that I don't even know who I am anymore. And in fact, I might be even in an identity quake. Identity quake. What in the world is that? So this is a pretty complex slide, and I'll just give you a few moments to study it, because on the left-hand side is who we have always seen ourselves as professionals. You know, how we got into our professional role in the first place, the professionalism that we exhibit or tried to exhibit once we got there. But then when burnout starts to trickle in and pressures rise and stressors rise for not just you, but everyone on the team and in the organization, then we start to doubt ourselves, maybe one another, and we take on this huge negative self-talk, or maybe we've even bantering back and forth with some of our colleagues, and that can result in some pretty stressful negative self-talk. So I'll give you a few minutes just to study the slide so we can probably identify with it and continue with our discussion today. So while you've been doing that, I've been contemplating myself, you know, just looking at this beautiful scenery and what it means to me and who I've become over the last few years, and whether anybody else can see it. Can anyone else see the fear that I have inside of me, the pain I'm feeling, maybe even the anger that I'm trying to hide? Have I been thinking about engaging in coping mechanisms that may not be very healthy for me? And if so, and if I'm getting pretty far down in the pit, am I willing to ask for help? Because I'm not sure how to get myself back out of this hole that I've dug, or that that I've fallen into, in this whirlwind that I've been in. How do I get back to who I really am? Well, the first step is just to commit to yourself, to begin. And that doesn't mean you failed. You know, one of the best phrases I ever heard was, someone tried to bury me, but they didn't realize I was a seed. It takes cracking open that seed, kind of the death of the seed, for the plant to arise, for the plant to thrive in the fertile environment that it's been placed in. And maybe the environment you're in right now isn't fertile. Maybe you need to make a change. So don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid that this might be the wrong grounds for you, and you might have to take some bold steps to get to the next level, to move on with your life, because necessary endings are necessary. Endings are necessary for new beginnings for us all. So what we need to do is start to really believe and understand who we are first. Who am I? And I'm not talking about, yes, I'm a doctor, or I'm a nurse, or I'm an administrator, or I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a this or that. What are your core values? What do you stand for deep down inside? Because that's what your integrity and your character stands upon. That's the bedrock of what we're talking about today. So I'm excited to talk about this, because we can't stay here in this whirlwind, as we've talked about. We've got to figure out ways to escape this whirlwind, become the eye of our own storm, envision who I really am in the midst of everything else that's going on, so I can stand up, stand out on firm bedrock of who I am, what my values are, my mission, my vision. And if you've never thought about that, that's what we're going to do today. We're going to examine, really dig deep now, and really examine our lives, because as we've heard before, a life unexamined is not worth living. And here's our opportunity. Burnout is our opportunity for our awakening. Because if you're like me, contemplating whether medicine is still the place for you, we need to make a decision. Which path are we going to be on? Are we going to stay on the burnout, stormy path with the whirlwind going in the background? Or we're going to look up, enjoy the beautiful scenery, look for the rainbows, the sunshine, the clear path of who we really are, where we're meant to be, and how we're going to get there. I'd like to help define that path for you and walk it with you. So last time we talked about the pathophysiology of burnout, which has probably made you giggle a little bit. Pathophysiology of burnout, really? Yeah, that's how we think. So it seemed to make sense to me. So there are two methods that we talked about to increase our energy balance. And it's just like your bank account, remember? So you have to stop spending, which is you have to stop your energy drain. And we talked about some techniques like that last week. We talked about the mindfulness, the squeegee breath, and all of that. So now we're going to wrap it into our own self-talk. Okay? We've got to stop this negative, very defeating, detrimental self-talk. That identity quake we talked about a few minutes ago. We've got to pop ourselves out of that whirlwind, just like we talked about before. So what we're going to do is set our mind in a beautiful place. Maybe you set your mind in some beautiful memories you may have had in your beautiful places. Mental imagery. We're going to take our big breaths. We're going to, okay, take a big breath in, and we're going to abolish everything that doesn't belong here right now. All that negative self-talk, all those things that just simply are not true. They simply are not true. The most powerful exercise I ever saw about that was, I was at a resiliency retreat, and there's lots of them. If you'd like to know more, I have a really great one I can recommend for you. But at this retreat, fellow physicians wrote out in sentence form their own negative self-talk about what they say to themselves. So they wrote out their own negative self-talk in sentence format, and they exchanged it with a partner. And the partner had to read it as if they were saying it back to them, as if they were talking about them, but it was in their own words. Extremely powerful. And the whole room was crying after a series of these, because it sounded something like this. And these were his own words. You're such a terrible father. I don't even know how you show up in public with those children, the way you treat them. You're a terrible father. And on. Several examples of that from each person. And it's shocking how we treat ourselves. And we would never treat anybody else like that. So it's a really good exercise on really reflecting on our own self-talk and how damaging it is for our own minds, our own hearts, our own souls to hear that, because we start to believe it after a while. So when we start to go there, we need to stop. Stop beating ourselves up. Stop that negative self-talk. Do a squeegee breath. Pop yourself out of that whirlwind. Get in the eye of your own storm to calm yourself, cool, collected, and really start thinking about who you really are. Not that negative, untrue business, because we know that it's not helpful. We know it's not true. We got to do our squeegee breath, abolish all those negative, destructive thoughts. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Put a big smile on our face and say, yes, there I am. Focus on your own core values and who you know you are, and then go be the person you were meant to be. Now we're going to talk about increasing our energy recharge, which is pretty hard to consider given the fact we're in our, health worker programming all day long. Because it's not just as easy as recharging the batteries we talked about. Can't just throw them in new batteries and start marching in like the Energizer Bunny. We think we can, but it doesn't work that way, because we have to really commit to our own self-care. Burnout prevention is all about giving yourself permission to do it differently. It's critical for us and our families and for the people we serve. We gotta learn to set some boundaries around that healthcare worker off switch. We're not very good at shutting that thing off when we come home. So we gotta figure out how to leave our work at work, leave our stress at work, do our squeegee breath, clearing techniques on the way home with our favorite music on. When we get home, take our leadership hat off, take your doctor hat, take your nurse hat, administrator hat off, change your clothes, change your uniform, put your workout clothes, your chore clothes, go do something completely different as often and as long as you can to recharge yourself. It's critical. Remember our good nutrition, rest and relaxation techniques, whether it's exercise or more quiet activities depending on the day. If you just want to read, watch a movie, go to a performance, do your own work or artwork, music, whatever brings you the greatest joy. And do it with friends. I mean, rekindle those relationships that you may have kind of let drift for a while because you're so focused on just getting yourself through your day. Because we're trying to focus on our work-life balance here, remember? We're going to spend some more time with our family, with people we love, doing things we love doing together. This is one technique I know I can do. I can get on my horse and ride to the top of the most beautiful mountains and get my mindset set again. So what are your most momentous victories? I'd like to hear about them. Write them down and make your own collage. What has worked for you in the past? Because if we're going to get ourselves out of this whirlwind, this insanity trap, we have to start thinking like Einstein. We have to put down our old mindset and think about new ones. Invest in ourselves as influential, disciplined leaders. And a lot of that has to do with relationships and becoming vulnerable with personal relationships, really trusting our thoughts and our feelings with someone else. And the best researcher I've ever come across is Brene Brown. She is phenomenal. She's got a brand new book out called Atlas of the Heart. And it's going to become a prerequisite for my course, I think, because it's so amazing how she describes up to 83 different human emotions that most of us, we might identify once they're named, but we probably don't have a very good understanding of them. And so this is a great resource for us to start from. Because it's not just who I am, it's how I lead, because that trickles over into everything we do. So the program will really focus on defining who I am as a bedrock, because I have to understand myself first before I can lead anybody else. And I have to understand other personality styles and how they tend to think and what their motivational styles are. And that's called emotional intelligence, because we need to really work well with each other, all the different personality styles, to have synergy in our team and have better outcomes. Because as we all understand now, that if we have misunderstandings, which are quite frequent these days, it leads to some pretty bad effects. One of my favorite questions is, are leaders born or made? We could debate that for quite a while, couldn't we? Because as this little guy likes to demonstrate, some of us were born that way. 80% of our personality is genetic, and but the other 20%, we have influence over, and that's the emotional intelligence piece that we're going to learn about in the program. And we're going to start by talking about our core values. And yeah, that might seem like a really boring topic, but we first have to understand ourselves and what we stand for, what our beliefs are, our deeply held convictions, our rules of engagement, the principles we operate on, what we consider our ethics, because that's how we conduct ourselves and interact with other people. So there are personal values and there are corporate values. We know this. So we really have to have pretty in-depth exercises about our own personal values first before we can understand anyone else's. And so we need to define our own core values, because the purpose of them is, again, to steer us in the directions we want to go in terms of an action. And do those core values actually reflect what makes me special, what makes me stand out from someone else? So if you've never done this before, you can download a list of core value words that you can kind of circle the ones that seem to make the most sense to you. Start with 10 and then kind of sift it down to 4 or 5. And then have a partner test that with you and have them ask you a bunch of questions about something you have in common. Any subject, just pick a subject. And then as you talk about it, the partner will ask you questions. Well, why do you think that way? Well, tell me more about that. And a series of why questions, clicking down to the point where you kind of keep talking about the same things over and over again. And the same key words keep popping up. And that's how you can determine what a core value is to you. So here's an example of what I've come up with over the years for my core values. And this exercise started for me in 2014, and I'd never done it before. And so it's evolved over time. And so the words I came up with were authenticity, integrity, emotional intelligent communication, and continuous quality improvement. And then you put that in verbal forms, in a form of an action, starting with a verb, to really define what that means to you. And then we go on to our mission and our vision statements. And the mission statement is kind of your purpose, your passion in life, what you are put on this earth for. Why do I exist? What am I doing here? And who am I doing it for? What is my rallying cry? What do I get out of bed every day to do? And the vision statement is okay, how am I going to achieve that? How am I going to get there? It's a future forward-looking timeline, which defines your purpose and your values. And it's the scaffolding of your being. So here's an example of my mission statement, which happens to be faith-based. Yours doesn't have to be, and it's obviously everyone's is going to be very different. Here's my overall leadership philosophy, which we'll get into in the program as well, and my vision statement is listed there in terms of kind of how I hope to help lead organizations to a healthier state. And then the leadership style is listed there as well. And we'll learn about levels of leadership competencies, and what defines a great leader, so that you don't have to have any self-doubt anymore. You know who you are. You know what you stand for. And you live in your own integrity, in your own character, and people know that about you, and they can trust that. And then they will follow. You'll be victorious over burnout in your own life, and you'll achieve the work-life balance you're looking forward to. So if you'd like to learn more, go to standupstandoutdocs.com. I look forward to meeting you.